Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. It is exactly 20 after 9 o'clock. A very big welcome to our Polokwane listeners on One Nation FM. On the show this morning, it gives me great pleasure to talk to multi-award winning public health practitioner and activist. That's Dr. Shakira Choonara. She is with the World Health Organization and also with the United Nations. She travels between Johannesburg, Geneva, and the US. What a life, Alhamdulillah. Today we talk about a very serious issue, and that is medical xenophobia. It's time to level the power imbalance in healthcare facilities. This is an article she's written in her personal capacity, and it made for some very interesting reading and comments as well. Assalamu alaikum to you, Dr. Shakira Choonara. Lovely to have you on the show.
Welcome, salam, Julie, and to your listeners as well. It's lovely to check in and I think, spotlight this really critical issue in the country.
Okay, you wrote this article after that debacle with the Limpopo Health MEC. I think that is just a tip of the iceberg, is it not? Luckily, that she was recorded and the recording went viral. But this is something that happens on a daily basis at all state medical facilities. Sadly, um, I think this talks directly to mass or wholesale corruption in the country. Because if we didn't have corruption at the highest of levels, we wouldn't be sitting with a situation like this.
Yeah, Julie, I think it speaks to that loss of the moral compass and our morals and the types of leaders that we really have. And for me, I think it's not only foreign nationals in the system which are experiencing this mistreatment. Working on the ground level, one sees, for example, that regular patients, the way they treated the minute they enter the healthcare facility. Yes, there's many reasons for why this happens, but one is seeking healthcare, one is ill. You're meant to be treated with kindness and empathy, but that doesn't happen. And I think it's across the broad spectrum, but with foreign nationals or even people who have disabilities, for example, or any other sort of social grouping in society which is discriminated against, even people living with HIV, you actually discriminated against from that very point of service. For example, many know that you don't have to provide your identity document when seeking care, if it's an emergency, etc., etc. That's what the legislation says. But still, we find that the practitioner on the ground or the person at the very entry point will still deny the patient care. And even if, for example, a foreign national, what we find is if a foreign national gives some of the documents that they have, because of discrimination, they still turned around from the facility. So I think this is widespread. It's been ongoing for several years in the country. But I think just the blatant disregard in the way someone is treated, it should spark a massive outcry.
What is so very sad is that patients at state facilities are totally helpless when they go for medical care, because you have all of these medical personnel. Let me not generalize, but some of these officials and medical personnel that are there that really have this power over, immigrants and obviously locals as well. So you go there and you are a voiceless person, you are embarrassed, you are talked down at, and you are absolutely voiceless. You dare not oppose what is being said to you, or how they have you in a very embarrassing situation. Even people who seek, uh, you know, uh, 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 a preventative, they go in, young girls who go in and they want birth control pills. They are then scolded at and being asked the question, why are you sexually active at such an early age or stage of your life? And here they're taking preventative measures just to protect themselves. So there's these type of ridiculous and very embarrassing um, situations that patients find themselves in, and they dare not speak up in protection against themselves or justify anything for why they're there, because then medical services will be denied to them, because that is the reality.
Yeah, you're spot on, Julie. And, I think back of the very early days when I used to accompany my dad to the public facilities as well, is you can't even ask the question, where's the medication? How long are we going to be waiting? Where can we seek the help? You're basically lost in the system and you pushed from pillar to post. And I think so many patients go through that. And I think it's absolutely heart wrenching. And I think the other issue also is that we're unable to, it's exactly what you said. If you speak out, you will be denied care. But then also, what's your avenues for complaints? Very few patients know that the hospital CEO, for example, is sitting in that very hospital. We need to go and seek them out and complain. Yes, they have complaints boxes, but I don't know who reads them. And I think it's what we don't realize as patients and as the public is that we actually also have power. These are people who are meant to serve us as well and respect us as well. They should not hold or they should not be gatekeepers to our care, but really facilitators.
What's sad for me is you use the word gatekeeper. I actually feel that the poor, the masses that go for medical care, these officials and medical practitioners really play God in those moments that the poor patients are interacting with them. And you dare not say anything. It is very, very sad. The reason you wrote this article, I mean, I can hear how disgusted and angry and disillusioned you are with the medical. With the Department of Healthcare or the state facilities, when you came across the utterances of the Limpopo Health MEC. So you've responded pretty strongly with this article you've written. Do you think it's going to make a difference? And talk to me a little bit about this article.
Look, I think we all can't make massive changes wherever we are. But in our small little way, it's very important to speak out when we can. And of course, I also face a risk. I can't just go out and say what I want to say working with certain organizations. But at the very heart of it, I think we cannot be silent in times of in these sorts of times that we're seeing. And as a young South African, I'm very disappointed with what's happening in the healthcare system. And for me, I work across the African continent and I'm welcome every country I go to, Julie. I'm welcomed by the young people with open arms taken around the country, and I feel at home. And to think of the way we're treating foreign migrants in our country is I'm actually embarrassed to tell people that I'm South African. And so I feel very strongly about Africa and the African identity that I have and the people that I work with. But I think it's also just on a human level. When one sits back and you watch the way this MEC is berating the patient, this is completely wrong. This is someone in a position of power, someone who is part of the African National Congress, someone who, for example, is holding a high position in society. She should be pushing these issues at boardroom tables, behind closed doors, with the president of the country in the policy conferences, but not with the patient you're meant to serve. I mean, for me, it's absolutely inhumane. And if you think of issues such as life esedimeni and how patients were treated like animals, how they were starved to death and they were tied with ropes, these are things we cannot forget in the healthcare system. And what we're seeing now are sort of these monsters which are showing their heads in a way. And for me personally, I think maybe the article is not going to cause massive ructions, but I hope it starts to get patients to think about what's the avenue that you can pursue. And it starts to get others to think about medical xenophobia, because we talk about xenophobia, but we're not talking about the medical side.
So these people seem to be power drunk. They have positions and they wield their power on the most helpless in the society, and that's these poor people that don't have medical aids, they don't have the money to go to a private facility, and they are at the mercy of monsters like these, and they're at the mercy at the state. Sadly, the officials and the onlookers that work at those institutions kind of almost side with these people in power, possibly because they're afraid that they would lose their positions or they would then be victimized in some form or the other. Um, Also, you've said that you travel very, very widely. You go to many, very many other African countries. Do you find a similar situation playing out there as well? Because people that access health services in South Africa they're in a very subservient position with the officials and the healthcare practitioners. It's almost as if I step out of line, I'm not going to be serviced here, or I may be given an inferior medication. I may be given the wrong medication as punishment, God forbid, or whatever else.
Look, it's a reality across the world, and I don't think it's just South Africa, but I think it's the extent to what we're seeing in South Africa, Julie, is what we see across the world is if one is a migrant, whether you're an asylum seeker or refugee, and you don't have the documents and you enter another country, one, are you going to pass the border control? You're probably not. Two, if you're going to try and access healthcare facilities, you're probably not going to get the access. What we find is these sorts of patients tend to get access at MSF, for example, or the UN Refugee Agency, for example, or maybe even non-governmental organizations. But to get into a state facility is an absolute nightmare. And you find the similar sort of discrimination as well across the spectrum against migrants. And I think it's something we need to talk about, because one day you and I or anyone could be a migrant. If I have to fall ill, and I mean, this MEC makes an example where she herself says that if I go to Canada, I had to get travel insurance or medical insurance. Yet she's doing the very same thing to the patients. I think the deep
Absolutely.
irony of it, it shows immaturity. It shows a lack of leadership. Essentially, it's, as I watched that video as well, Julie, it made me think about, when you're at school and someone's picking on someone or bullying someone, and people all around are cheering them on. And that's essentially what it is. It's bullying. But at this age, at this level of position, at this level of qualification as well, because she's clearly very intelligent. The way she speaks, she quotes statistics. But to come off and say that, I think it's something that's absolutely should be, denounced in the country.
Shakira, I just want to add to that very, very sadly. I come from a corporate environment and I was in that space for a very long time. And you'd be amazed, these very highly qualified top leaders and top managers, you can't believe what bullies they are. And it talks directly to the issue of being power drunk, power hungry, and self esteem and self worth issues, doesn't it? That's where it goes to directly. And also another issue that I'll throw into that same pot is the issue around survival of the fittest. So it is so sad. Again, these top leaders, these top management, we're talking top echelons of industry, play these political games and end up becoming bullies. And once again, it's the poor layperson who suffers the consequences.
Absolutely. And it's also a class issue. We touched on this in the article, but also in this discussion. It's the way the poor and middle class are treated compared to those who are wealthier. Every sphere of society, whether you're going into a plane or whether you're going into a healthcare facility. I mean, I wrote a blog many years ago about Kenyatta Hospital in Nairobi, where the top level, it's sort of like a private healthcare facility feel. You even have a jacuzzi in the room, and
Ooh.
the nine, eight, nine other layers below are for the poorer patients. And so we see this class divide across society and the way people are treated. And I think we as humans need to look back at that introspection. And Julie, since you're giving me the platform, I'll talk about how we as citizens are also being bullied right now. The fact that ESCOM is even bullying us to pay these high tariffs, and they have the sole monopoly. And I think this idea of complete power of the state that's emerging in various ways in society is really, really scary in our democracy.
Shankar, I need to get you on the show another time as well, because the other thing that I have really a huge issue with, and I'm not saying that doctors and specialists shouldn't be going this route, because it doesn't matter what profession you're in, you do want to make money. You're there, you've chosen a particular profession to be gainfully employed, to provide a top notch, top class service, but you also want to be paid back in kind. But a lot of professionals these days, doctors, are charging, if you're fortunate enough to belong to a medical aid, are charging anything between 200 to 500% and beyond medical aid rates, meaning that if you're on medical aid, you either have to have gap cover or you have to pay the difference out of your pocket. And I'm kind of wondering if we're not finding ourselves in a similar situation as well when we accessing private healthcare. So if I can't pay that, in 500% beyond what my medical aid would pay, I've got to now negotiate with the doctor and ask for some sort of a discount, which is a bit embarrassing, I might add. But because of affordability issues, I've got to go that route. So because he's giving me a discount, am I still going to get top class service, or is the service level going to drop? I kind of wonder about that all the time, Shakira. Are you going to bring in the Hippocratic oath here? I've just lost Shakira there. I have. Let's leave it then. Shakira, did you get my final message? My final question?
I did, and it's a topic I feel very passionate about, and I'd love to be back, but I'll break it down into three things. There's probably doctors also face high medical legal costs, and they need to
Ah,
cover the insurance, for example. Two, we're unable to measure the quality in the private sector. So yes, it looks better, it feels better than the public system, but is it better? Are they doing unnecessary tests, for example? And three, it's also a matter of greed. There are many cases where people are pursuing a capitalist lifestyle, being in the profession for profits, not for healthcare, and that of course also speaks to the situation. But I guess a conversation for another day.
absolutely. Let me give you the last word. Then I definitely am going to take you up on this next interview with me regarding this issue. Let me do my research as well, and let's try and unpack it and see what is fair. What is fair to the doctor? What is fair to the patient, or to take into account that some doctors have rooms and facilities in upmarket areas, and that too comes at a price, obviously. But to wrap up on what we've been talking about regarding accessing state facilities, and do you believe that this Limpopo Health MEC needs a case to be answered? Does she need to be brought before some form of disciplinary board? We need to make an example so other people don't follow. People need to realize you need to treat every human being that you come into contact with, regardless of what facility you're in, what profession you're in. That is a human being, and they need to be treated with respect.
I mean, one thing I'm not a fan of in the current context is these long investigations that we have. Why do you need an investigation? You have the video on record. You can see this. And so for me, it's a question of why is she not being dismissed as yet? Is it because she's a cadre? I don't know. If this was another institution, a private sector facility, she'd be dismissed immediately. So I think I don't know what's taking the government so long, and I think it's a matter of national concern that members in these positions are treating very patient or patients on the ground in this way.
Dr. Shakira Choonara, an absolute pleasure to have had you on my show this morning. You are a multi award winning public health practitioner and activist. You also work with the World Health Organization and the United Nations. I'm so proud that you are a daughter of our community. Go well, keep safe, and salamu alaikum to you.
Kum salam.
The time is exactly 9:39. Standing by to talk with us this morning, we go right across to the UK. We'll be talking with Masood Shachra, Islamic Human Rights Commission, regarding the issue between Muslim and Hindu youth in Leicester. But stand by. We'll be taking that interview in a minute, inshallah.